Ruth Hetherington is the Middle East spokeswoman for the International Committee of the Red Cross, and she joins us now live from Geneva. Hi, Ruth. Thanks for being with us. It's $2.6 billion, but actually $6 billion was what was initially requested. Is this enough to help?
Thanks. Well, look, the situation in Syria after 10 years of conflict is so catastrophic that it's hard to know how much money would ever be enough to help. On top of a protracted conflict that has been particularly brutal and unrelenting, that has just exhausted Syrians, we're now seeing quite a catastrophic combination of factors that are pushing potentially millions of them towards deeper poverty and hunger. So on top of these immediate needs, we're seeing a need to plan long-term as well. And of course, it's not just about resources, which although we do need support, we need support to keep supporting people, but it's also very much about access as well, which is key for any sort of life-saving humanitarian aid, but particularly in Syria. And so we are calling for access to those areas where we currently want more access. We want to ramp up work with our movement partners, in particular Idlib and the Idlib pocket.
Right, because logistically, I mean, getting aid and getting these pledges is one thing, but the logistics of your trying to deliver that help and get to people who need it, I mean, just how challenging is it?
It's incredibly challenging. It's always challenging. Access is always challenging. You're always urging all parties to the conflict to give us access, to give humanitarian agencies the access they need and we need to reach the people who need it most. And what's particularly difficult now is that we see that humanitarian needs are immense and rising in a way that threatens to potentially overwhelm any capacity to respond. And when we don't have access, then obviously that situation becomes so much worse. And in Idlib, there's 4 million people, half of whom have been displaced. Many of whom have been displaced many times over. There's devastated infrastructure. So a lot of the issues we're seeing across Syria, but particularly bleak there in the sense that, and we need to get in and to do assessments and to deliver the aid that we would like to deliver.
Right. And I mean, if you are eventually able to gain access, get in there and do those assessments, what are you expecting in terms of actually having to rebuild infrastructure that's necessary to deliver services and basic housing for these millions of people that have been displaced?
Well, getting in and doing the assessment is key. You want to obviously see what people need, what they want most. And what we're seeing from recent months is that besides needing basic infrastructure, besides needing housing, besides needing water services, clean water, besides emergency food aid, they also need long-term prospects. They need livelihood support. What we've seen, especially with the COVID pandemic, which has exacerbated all the consequences of this conflict, is that people's livelihoods have been immensely affected. People have lost the ability to provide for themselves. And most worryingly, we're seeing on top of all those people who are already in an incredibly difficult situation, we're seeing newly vulnerable groups. So people who have just begun to take the first steps towards rebuilding their lives, towards opening business, getting support. And they've had to come back saying these recent months have hit my business, have hit me. I'm having to go back towards humanitarian aid again. So it's a combination of focusing on rebuilding physically, rebuilding people's capacity, but also planning for the long term and particularly looking at people's food security, their ability to access and afford food, and also their ability to provide for themselves and their families in the long run.
Okay, Ruth Hetherington joining us there. Thank you so much for being with us.